What started out as a reunion concert descended into a full-on brawl. Shocking claims from several sources have left the music industry completely shocked. Two of Miami's most famous characters, Jim Jones and Camron, were reportedly arrested after a violent altercation backstage that shocked fans and left security stunned. Witnesses claimed that what began as a heated argument over the performance order swiftly turned into something far darker, complete with flashing police lights, damaged equipment, and shattered egos. You read right to ex-brothers fought, which led to fistfights, heated arguments, and total chaos, when Camron and Jim were allegedly detained and taken out while the cameras were recording. Fans asked incredulously on social media, "Is this really the end of Dipset? What could have caused such a public dispute between two legends?" Watch out, because what follows isn't only shocking, it's on what should have been a celebratory night. Fans flocked to see the eagerly awaited reunion of Camron, Jim Jones, Jules Santana, and Freaky Ziggy of Dipset. The unadulterated emotional drama that filled the stadium with memories was unexpected. And trust us, is just the beginning. Crowded with people sporting vintage Dipset paraphernalia, enjoying vintage music on their phones, and sharing tales about how these artists influenced a whole era of hip-hop. However, no one was aware that tension had been building behind the scenes for weeks and would explode tonight in a way that would completely alter the situation. Rumors started to circulate. It was first difficult to grasp what was happening, due to shaky footage, distorted faces, muffled yelling, and frantic social media posts. But it soon became evident that Run and Jim Jones were engaged in a heated argument that went beyond verbal abuse. Equipment was smashed, seats were overturned, and voices were amplified to deafening levels. Fans were shocked, perplexed, and saddened by the videos, which depicted two brothers who had formerly been inseparable fighting only minutes before they were about to share the stage. According to sources, the altercation started over a seemingly little change, and Jim Jones had planned to start the show with his old wounds were resurfaced. What could have been a little argument turned into a full-fledged conflict. Jim accused Cam of constantly attempting to control the spotlight, while Cam responded that Jim was disloyal and that he had gone alone when the group was disintegrating. As things rapidly became worse, the area was crowded with stylists and security guards and stylists attempting to calm down. Both men were reluctant to give up. One crew member described the conflict as both physical and emotional, exposing information that had been kept secret for years. The comments turned into shoves, and the shoves turned into fists, and Jim supposedly yelled, "You left me out." It was as if we were seeing a family breakup. Those close to the group acknowledged that while they had previously made up in public, their disagreements had never been really resolved. As Cam phrased it, "You've always been jealous of me. Too dry when I needed you most." The chaos that broke out backstage tonight, with fans outside becoming agitated over the show being postponed for more than an hour, and people chanting without knowing what was going on, unaware that their favorite artists were being handcuffed just a few feet away and that police had arrived, quickly undid all the forced interviews and fake smiles that had been put on display behind closed doors. One of the crew members recorded Camron being let out in handcuffs, his face flushed with anger, and the footage of their arrest instantly went viral. Both rappers were visibly bruised and still yelling at one another as they were being dragged apart when officers arrived on the scene of a violent confrontation that left two staff members hurt, one with a split lip and the other with a damaged wrist, while attempting to separate Cam and Jim, while some spectators videotaped the moment in shocked silence. Others yelled their names. Media sites said that what was intended to be a triumphal comeback had instead become a nightmare. Shortly after his chain broke his voice from shouting, the two were escorted into separate police cars, which shocked the audience outside the theater. As they recalled their relationship and contrasted it with the recent dramatic breakup, Fans started posting old recordings of the two of them laughing together in interviews. Social media was ablaze with stories about Camron and Jim Jones. Arrest after a backstage confrontation and the dramatic finale of the Dipset reunion. Since they reared us, the treachery seemed personal to many admirers. According to one Twitter user, "We grew up on Dipset." Some claimed to have anticipated this, while others were astonished and furious. "This feels like our big brothers are fighting." Jim and Cam were kept apart in different holding cells that night, and despite the timely arrival of their legal teams, the harm had already been done. Both guys, according to an insider, were frightened by the battle and the awareness of how far they had fallen. Jim kept pacing, asking how it got to this point. Cam just sat with his head down. It was the silence after the storm, and it said more than any punch ever. Jill Santana, who was getting ready in his dressing room when the incident started, said he tried to mediate once he sensed things were becoming hot. But it was too late by the time he reached them. Jules exclaimed, "Not like this, man. Not after everything we've been through." Given that they were already on thin ice and that he broke down backstage after witnessing two of his closest friends being taken away by police. Industry insiders speculated that this would be the last straw. The consequences were immediate. Fans demanded refunds, sponsors pulled out of the tour, and concert producers started to reconsider upcoming Dipset performances. Promoter, "This may be the end." On social media, fans debated about who was at fault, calling Camron intrusive and Jim nasty and insecure. Everyone agreed that it may be over, regardless of whose side they chose. Yet, even in the middle of social media, several musicians expressed their sorrow and wished for peace. One post said, "Come on, dip up. You guys are bigger than this. Fix it before it's too late." Another added, "Hip-hop needs you all together, not split apart like this." As the dust settled and the community attempted to comprehend what had just transpired, it was unclear if Cam and Jim would hear those words. But one thing was certain, things will never be the same again. When everyone believed the drama had reached its peak the following morning, an unexpected event occurred. And as everyone thought the drama had peaked, the next morning, a voicemail, purportedly from Jim Jones, who was still being held in custody hours after the brawl, started making the rounds on the internet. Jim's voice was low, tired, and tinged with pain, and he spoke slowly, as if every word mattered. "I'm not even angry at Camron," he added. "I'm angry at myself because we let the fans and Dipset down. At first, no one could verify that the video was authentic. But it quickly went viral, and by midday, was being published on well-known hip-hop websites. Fans had differing opinions on statements like the end of Dipset hits harder than we thought, and Jim Jones regrets everything. Some sympathized with him when he made the admission, while others wondered whether the post was a clever ruse to gain favor behind the scenes. It was far more chaos than anybody had anticipated. According to others close to Camron, he had not sent any tweets or Instagram stories, written any enigmatic notes, or made any public pronouncements. He was angry not only over the fight, but also at the speed with which Jim's team had begun to fix the damage. An insider claims that Cam believes Jim is attempting to manipulate the tale and feels deceived once more, to keep everything from utterly collapsing. Jules Santana started phoning both parties and invited them to meet and discuss the issue. However, neither Jim nor Cam were prepared because they were too emotionally invested and consumed by years of unresolved conflict. Even Freaky Zeke, who had always been the comedian, with relief, silence fell. In a succinct statement, his team expressed their deep sadness over the events and asked supporters to give the group some time to recover. They'll fight old wounds among the hip-hop community, making matters worse. Previously appreciative artists started to speak up, with some voicing their disapproval, some narrating disputes they had personally witnessed in the past. And one anonymous in a blog post, the producer claimed to have witnessed Cam and Jim quarrel over money at a recording. session years prior and that the brotherhood had been eroding for a while. Late that night, the surveillance film was revealed, and the unity Dipset had attempted to preserve abruptly broke down. Fresh video footage that was obtained from the venue's backstage security camera was different from the This Fan video clip, which was clearer than the others, showed Camron pushing Jim into a stack of speaker cases, causing him to swing back and collapse a table. Fans were appalled by their idol's actions since they were so obviously aggressive, even if the video was silent. Other footage showed staff members frantically trying to defuse the altercation as Jules rushed in. As a security guard pushed Cam back against a wall while attempting to remove Jim. The video went viral online, sparking the trending hashtags #Dips and #Cams. News outlets analyzed each video like a sports replay, and body language experts even shared their thoughts, asserting that Cam's stance revealed deeply rooted Jim's movement, exposed mental instability. It turned into a media circus, with demands for interviews, memes going viral, and discussion shows citing the struggle as the week's most significant pop cultural event. However, the label behind the Dipset tour put everything on pause since the consequences were getting really bad behind the scenes. Future dates were canceled, contracts were frozen, and all reunion-related merchandise was removed off the market. According to one report, the situation was a financial catastrophe, and Cam's co-workers accused him of being authoritarian and manipulative. Dozens of tech crew workers and staff dancers caught in the middle said that Jim's rage ruined everything after relying on the tour for his career. Camron, who is well known for his scathing remarks and savage clapbacks, abruptly quit. 2 days later, he posted a blank screen and a single statement to Instagram. When silence speaks louder than words, fans get perplexed. Was it doom, acceptance, or the end? Cam was chastised for his passive-aggressive behavior by some, while others demanded a reconciliation. We're supposed to be legends, not a headline. Jim Jones, meanwhile, said in a brief, extremely upset Instagram Live, "I'm ashamed of how I acted. I lost my cool, but I'm not the only one." As expected, this only added fuel to the fire. Cam's fans accused Jim of gaslighting. Jim's fans defended him, saying he was at least being truthful. In the midst of all of this turmoil, Dipset's legacy was gradually crumbling, uncertain about the public's reaction. Radio stations removed Dipset music from their daily playlists. The dispute occupied whole podcast episodes. Some called it the most public collective collapse since MUA, while others likened it to the autumn of June. One presenter made the statement, "This is what happens when ego goes unchecked for too long." Then, in the most unexpected development, a woman stepped forward to say that she had seen the fight and that it was over a woman, not music. She claimed that recent incidents had rekindled the hostility between Camron and Jim Jones, who had a long history of close relationships with the same woman. She said that Jim had discovered that Cam had secretly gotten in touch with her once more, and thus the backstage argument started. The internet didn't care that no one could confirm her story since it was sexy, dramatic, and the kind of surprise that fans love. The conflict is now being portrayed as a failed love triangle, with some joking that Dipset is the new reality television drama, and others complaining that two legends shouldn't waste decades of legacy for a girl. Whether or not the story was true, it altered the plot once more. Since they were seeing lives unfold in real time rather than simply a group breakdown, they were unable to look away. By this point, Jim and Cam were both out on bail, but the court mandated that they remain apart until the issue was settled. The irony that exists between these two people due to attorneys, damage control crews, and over time they were abruptly unable to be in the same room after having previously traversed the world together. In a radio interview, one experienced musician stated, "This isn't beef, this is heartbreak." The hip-hop business awaited the next development. However, at the exact moment when, apart from their individual transgressions, Camron and Jim Jones also had to cope with the consequences of their conduct, which their close friends, followers, and the media. Behind the scenes, tensions were rising as the days went by and the public waited in suspense. It seemed as though everything had fallen to its lowest point and that the course of events would be irrevocably changed. When an unexpected phone call that no one had expected was placed out in reality, nobody could really foresee Dipset's fate. Could they save what remained of their heritage, or had the harm been irreparable? Known for his composed demeanor, Camron had been oddly quiet since the tragedy. And his typically witty and cryptic social media accounts had become normally. Camron could find a way to make any situation humorous, but this time, his posts lacked humor. In fact, he wasn't posting at all, and his eerily silent fans, especially those who had stood by him for years, were beginning to get scared, since they hadn't seen him like this before. Jim Jones, on the other hand, spoke up more on Twitter, was replete with remarks on the situation, including an apology to Camron, fans, and supporters of DETAINED. It's been a rough road, but I'm learning and growing, he stated, but his supporters weren't convinced. Others said it was just another ploy to get back the admiration he had lost to real men, while others applauded him for admitting his mistakes. But with Dipset's irreversible split, the big question still hung over everything. Was this the end of one of the most recognizable hip-hop groups ever? It doesn't change the fact that the damage is done, and we won't forget what happened. Jim, a supporter, commented. The mixed reactions only seemed to add fuel to the fire. But despite the drama and public division, there was a sense of inevitability. There were many rumors going about, with some saying that Camron and Jim Jones hadn't spoken in days, and others suggesting that they would get back together, but only under certain situations. Fans were divided in the meanwhile. Some continued to trust in the group's power and the connection that had united them years before, while others felt deceived and their allegiance was completely shattered. Santana Jules, who has always, according to those close to Jules, he was irritated and annoyed by the entire scenario since, as the mediator between Jim and Cam, he was caught in the middle of everything. He was determined to make things right because he knew that if there was any possibility of fixing things, it had to begin with him. He had worked so hard to keep them friendly, and now it felt like all of that effort was crumbling. Jules took matters into his own hands after a few stressful days, making separate attempts to set up a private meeting with Camron and Jim Jones. He knew that it had to be in person. There couldn't be any more phone calls or cryptic messages. It had to be genuine. Jim Jones was more forthright because he had been thinking about the consequences of his actions and was ready to face the problem, even though it was uncomfortable when they eventually sat down. And Camron, who is known for his sharp tongue and quick wit, was uncharacteristically silent. It was significant to have Jim Jones in the same room, since it was the first time the two had chosen to speak since the altercation. The two men sat opposite one another, the weight of their recent and past fallout looming large in the awkward silence that filled the room. There was a noticeable edge to Camron's steady voice. "You know, Jim," he added softly, "I never thought I'd be sitting here with you after what happened. You disrespected me." In front of distraught fans and family, Jim Jones said, "I know, and I can't take it back. But I'm here now, and I want to fix this. I want us to get past this, Cam," as an expression of regret. "You said that already, Jim, but actions speak louder than words." As the conversation went on, there were times when it seemed possible that they could get back together, but it was evident that there was still a lot of hurt and mistrust between them. Camron seemed to think about his options for a minute. Fans, meanwhile, were dying with curiosity as they awaited a public declaration from Jim Jones and Camron, as their shared history and the times when DETAINED was at the top of the rap game. It felt for a moment as though they were back in the studio working together, making magic, but soon reality set in. The damage was done, and there would be no easy way to recover. People took to social media to demand an update, wondering if Dipset was truly finished or if the two might reconcile. One fan said on Twitter, "You both hurt the fans. Now you need to fix this." The pressure was increasing. When the time came, Camron posted a brief but powerful statement on Instagram. "Sometimes the strongest bonds are tested. We've been through a lot. We'll figure it out. Stay tuned." Jim Jones then posted a message of his own sincere conversation, saying, "We've been down too long. We're stronger." These messages didn't provide any specific answers that would have given fans hope that perhaps Dipset wasn't done after all. And the question, had Camron and Jim Jones gone too far and irreparably damaged the group? Or was it too little? Too late for the fans to forgive them for the public spectacle of the fight and the betrayal. Word of the brawl backstage spread like wildfire, rocking the hip-hop community as Camron and Jim Jones, two titans who once dominated the rap business together, battled for their legacy, raising questions about whether it was all over or if they could put their differences aside. What started as a night of celebration swiftly descended into chaos. And no one could have predicted the violent altercation that broke out between Camron and Jim Jones, two of the group's main members, leaving fans, journalists, and even their professional counterparts stunned when the fight's details were made public. It appeared as though the future of the iconic group Dipset itself was in jail. Years of unresolved emotions between the two artists apparently culminated in the backstage altercation at the party, when words were exchanged before a physical battle that resulted in Jim Jones and Camron being arrested on the scene. The situation was described as violent, with witnesses at the scene claimed that the ex-rappers were throwing fists and creating an inevitable commotion, so security had to intervene. The altercation not only left a lasting impression on the event, but also left onlookers wondering if the two famous figures could ever mend their strained relationship. After this public act of violence, fans who had previously viewed Camron and Jim Jones as brothers in arms were left to wonder if they would ever be reconciled, or if this was the last straw that would destroy the group's reputation. Rumors started to spread like wildfire over the fight's cause. Some claimed it was a personal dispute between the two, while others suggested there were more serious issues inside the organization. The bet was the best, but what hope do we have? If they can't even get along, read a social media comment. Some supporters voiced their disappointment, saying, "This is the end of an era," while others maintained their optimism. These sentiments were echoed in comments, with some people struggling to comprehend the abrupt dissolution of one of the most significant groups in hip-hop. Camron, who never backs down from controversy, handled the incident. Jim Jones and Camron had represented Dipset for years, and now their rivalry was destroying everything they had worked so hard to build. "I did my part, but when you constantly have to watch your back, it's time to move on," he wrote in a series of social media posts, expressing his frustration that, despite his best efforts to keep the peace, the betrayal he experienced was too big to ignore. His harsh remarks seemed to validate what many had feared, that Dipset as a group was no longer trustworthy. Although Camron's statement appeared to mark the end of an era, Jim Jones was not prepared to give up just yet. Instead, he adopted a more subdued approach. Even though his emotions were obviously running high, and shared a message that suggested a reconciliation. "I'm not ready to go just yet," he wrote, adding, "We've been through too much together to let one argument define us." His remarks offered some hope to those who still believed he and Camron were related, posing the question of whether the two icons could set aside their disagreements and get back together, or if the harm was to be fixed. The timing of the altercation was especially troubling because Dipset had been getting ready to go on a journey. Hip-hop, blogs, podcasts, and news channels all offered their opinions on the drama as it developed, with some outlets taking sides and others remaining neutral. Many questioned whether this public dispute was a temporary setback or a permanent fracture. Jules Santana, who had always been in the middle of Camron and Jim Jones' arguments, the situation and expressed his frustration in an exclusive interview. He claimed that he had tried his hardest to get the three of them back together for a much-anticipated reunion tour, but it appeared that hope was dwindling. Jules's passionate voice captured the tragedy. An inevitable nature of the situation. "We were brothers," he said, "but sometimes things change. People change. And I can't force something that isn't there anymore." Other than that, it seemed like a family. Fans of Camron and Jim Jones were split as the fight's public fallout and the pressure on them increased. Some expressed their anger and disappointment, while others continued to hope for a resolution. One fan wrote on Instagram, "We need Dips to sit back together," adding, "They were the best. Don't let be the end." However, as time passed, it became more evident that there were more important issues at hand, issues that could not be easily overlooked or forgotten. That get past the altercation's aftermath, Camron and Jim Jones had to face their inner demons and old grudges. Even the most hopeful supporters started to lose hope as the situation continued to get out of hand. What had once been a brotherhood built on loyalty and trust appeared to be disintegrating under the weight of pride, ego, and miscommunication as unspoken grudges and feelings of betrayal started to show. It was obvious that the road to reconciliation would not be an easy one. Rumors circulated over Dipset's future. Some said that Camron had already begun recording new songs without Jim Jones, while others implied that Jim Jones was pursuing a solo career without either rapper. Verified or refuted these claims. But it became clear over time that the group's future was still unclear. It was evident to fans that Dipset had lost its former strength. The last straw was when Jim Jones and Camron both made mysterious remarks on social media. Camron said in a statement announcing the termination of their collaboration, "There are times when you have to let go." Jim Jones once said, "It's time to move on, even if love is still there. Following their advice is more important than being correct." But they also admitted that Dipset was no longer the group had suffered severe consequences from the altercation backstage. And Camron and Jim Jones had previously for Dipset followers. Their battle signified the end of what had been indestructible and demonstrated that even the strongest relationships might be severed during a time of historic occasions, avant-garde music, and an indisputable cultural impact. But one question remained once the tale ended on Dipset. The reunion between Camron and Jim Jones is questionable. Although it appears like Dipset has finally had enough of the emotional roller coaster. Fans were stunned by Camron and Jim Jones' argument backstage, and the future of with all the drama, betrayals, and heartache. Dipset is unsure about what to do. Do you think Jim Jones and Camron will ever get back together? Or is this the goodbye Dipset? Kindly share your opinions in the area below. Don't forget to like. If you were taken aback by the sudden change of events, watch this video and click the subscribe button for more breaking news. We'll keep you informed of any developments regarding Camron, Jim Jones, and Dipset's future. If you truly adore Dipset, click the notification bell to ensure you don't miss anything that occurs next. Don't miss a tasty update. Continue the discussion, forward this video to your friends, and let's discuss what went down the next time. Check back frequently for drama, updates, and more. You won't want to miss this buzz from the entertainment industry.